Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Susan Seaman, Mayor of the City of Eureka. And now here's your host, Paul Versu.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm the host, Paul Versu, and today I'm speaking with the Mayor of Eureka, Susan Seaman. Welcome, Mayor, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I think you may be the highest ranking public official I've ever talked to on the show, so that's good. You are the executive of Eureka Municipal Government. What is that like?
What is that like? Well, why don't I tell you a little bit about how I picked this position?
They pick you? You have to tell us why you picked to run.
Well, why I picked to run, yeah, and because I haven't been in a position before. It's weird to call the mayor the highest position because it's just different. I see the mayor, I facilitate the conversations that we have at council. I don't have a vote on council. And so I really see my role as one where I'm able to help set the tone. I can help, lead conversations. I can certainly instigate projects. But as somebody told me as soon as I got elected, how does it feel to not have any power? Because I don't have a vote.
Is that true? Maybe not having a vote doesn't, you think that that's not having power, but you are the executive. You are the person that runs the government. The buck does stop there. There are things that you sign off on. I mean,
that is
the
definitely
a legislative position. That's, I guess, what I'm asking. What is it like to be the executive?
It's a great position because I have a council that we're very aligned. I can imagine that the position would be it would be much more difficult if you had a really split council or a council where you were alone in sort of your vision for the city, because you don't have those votes. And so, yes, you are the executive, but a lot of times it's just saying this is the way the council is going, and you could agree with that or not agree with that, but you don't actually get to push the button that says yes or no.
All right. So talk to me about shared vision. I mean, you say the council has your vision. What is the vision right now that's happening?
So we just finished our strategic visioning session. And even the folks who were leading it, they were like, this was just so refreshing because we really were aligned with the things that we were interested in. Housing, of course, is a top issue. And it's a top issue from from transitional housing, which is, for homeless transitioning, which is even below affordable housing. Then you have affordable housing for sort of the lower income working class folks. And we need market rate and even expensive housing for professionals that are coming to town. So we are lacking housing on every level. And we recognize that as a priority. Supporting our businesses, particularly after this difficult year. We did see an increase in sales tax revenue, which was really nice, but we recognize that the pandemic's been really hard on a lot of our small businesses, and doing what we can to support them. And we've been doing a lot of grants and programs that help to try to help get them some funding any way we can. Traffic safety, transportation safety, making our roads safer for pedestrians and bikers and drivers, anybody who uses our roadway. We want them to be safer at it. Community image, beautification of the city and the way we talk about the city, agreeing that we need to have a better image. So that's 4 things. Isn't that the way it goes? There are 5 things and you can only think of 4 of the 5?
Right before I ask you that, here we are coming out of a pandemic, a once in a lifetime problem and situation that we've been in. But as you've been mentioning other things, that doesn't mean the regular governing issues have stopped in Eureka. How challenging has that been to balance both the immediate and the ongoing?
That really has been something that's been interesting. The city never stopped. Public Works never stopped. When we talked about essential workers, we talk about the people that we interact with, grocery store workers, childcare providers, healthcare workers. But we did still have people out there doing what they needed to do to keep our water system running. And it was a hard year for them, just like it has been for everybody who's had to try to function in this really weird year. We had to come up with an incredibly brutal budget and anticipation of worst case scenario. And we're very fortunate to come out. We expected a $500,000 decrease. Did I say five?
When you say increase, you mean in revenue that would be coming in from taxes and what?
From sales tax. Yeah, and we have over, oh my gosh, I don't know why the numbers have escaped me. Over 2 million is what we got. So instead of having a decrease, we ended up having a significant increase. So that was great. We got a bond passed so that we could measure H, a sales tax increase. So we are going to be seeing a ton of road work. We're already seeing a ton of road work. That's not Measure H funds, but it's 5 times what we've been able to do in terms of filling up potholes and getting the streets fixed. So
that's money that went into the general fund and that's exactly what this show is about, to tell people that this is your government in action and this is what's going on and this is how we're improving the city of Eureka, right?
Exactly. Every time you come up to a roadblock and you're frustrated because you have to turn away, remember, that's going to be better, because if you just give it a day.
Right. That's fantastic. You mentioned housing at the start, and we have spoken to other guests about the housing issue for homeless populations and transitional housing you're talking about. Let's start there and just some of the ideas that the city is working on regarding that issue.
So, well, right now we are going to be going into round 2 of an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications to develop some of our parking lots. We have been met with great resistance to this second grouping. The first grouping is going to be Sunny and Myrtle, 8th and M, and then I forgot the third location because they're all getting jumbled in my mind. But these are parking lots that the city owns, and Link Housing made a proposal. We asked for proposals that would do all kinds of mixed income, but we have to meet affordable housing requirements per the RENA. And RENA is a requirement from the state for how many houses we need to build. And it stands for something that, you get stuck in these acronyms and you forget. Regional housing needs assessment. So they say you have to build this many places, and we can't force people to build on private property. So we're kind of limited in what we can make happen. And so we chose to use our parking lots to build housing, and we're going to have 107 units. The Link Housing, which made the proposals, will be doing additional services for these. So they're 2 and 3 bedroom. They're for working families. They'll have programs associated with them. They're working on kind of safety around the neighborhoods, traffic safety, transportation improvements so that people can get around easier. So those are the first 3 that came through. The second 3 were closer to Old Town, and we got a lot of pushback. So now we're looking at reassessing where we can put those different housing. Although if it comes down to it, we still need to get that number, and we could be revisiting that in another time.
Now, you said these would be 2 and 3 bedroom homes. These are affordable housing for young or new families that are buying homes, or?
They're not homes. It's multifamily housing apartments. So
Right.
they'd be 2 or 3 apartments. And we're looking, the general plan, the new zoning code, and the housing element all have allowances for higher buildings than we used to. So if you look at all the grand buildings, the places that were fabulous, in Eureka, down in Old Town, those are all really tall and big, and then if you look at newer zoning, it was a lot of parking focused sort of rules around that. So you have smaller buildings, they're shorter, but they're just really not that impressive. And quite frankly, a higher building will allow us to have more housing. So we're looking at pretty tall structures, five floors, which will allow us to have more units.
Okay. What about the demand that's gone on for people to move to Humboldt County and Eureka per se? I mean, the influx of people for whatever reasons, because now they can work from home and not have to live in certain urban areas. Now fires have pushed them out. I mean, how hot a ticket right now is Eureka?
Well, it's a pretty hot ticket, and you're right. We've been talking for several years about climate refugees, understanding that, the climate and the fires are sort of pushing people in our area. But I don't know that any of us sort of expected this rush on density refugees who were, fleeing from the big cities during the pandemic, figuring out that remote work is totally possible, and then saying they're just going to, buy a place and live here.
Right.
Yeah, and the housing's crazy. We check in at least weekly with the realtors. There's like there's been between like 105 and 115 houses on the market in all of the county.
That's incredibly low.
It's very low.
So people want to come to Eureka. Does that feel good that people want to come to Eureka?
Well, there are a few. Obviously, we want people to come to Eureka, but we have to have the infrastructure to accept that. So if we have folks coming from the Bay Area, they can buy some of our nicer homes, with their pocket change from what they got from their places down there. And so our concern is really pushing out working class families who are already struggling to find appropriate housing. But if the housing prices go up a whole lot, it'll make it even more difficult for folks who are living on median incomes here locally. Like, we can't compete with Google salaries.
But we want to retain some of the fabulous young people who grow up here and want to still live in their community.
Absolutely. But we do have really exciting things happening in the economy. There are 3 things that I think of immediately. One of them is the potential for Nordic aqua farms, which is the land-based fish farm that they're thinking of putting it over in the harbor. That's 150 jobs, and pretty decent paying jobs that will also really correspond with the HSU's programs. So that's great. We can get biologists from HSU and feed them into that. The other thing is HSU looking at becoming a polytechnic. Just has a lot of opportunities and ancillary businesses that can grow out of that. And then the third thing is the Trans-Pacific fiber optic line, which, if we don't pay attention to it, can just come in through Humboldt County and leave. But if we capture that opportunity when it comes, gives us chances to really fortify our broadband and improve our opportunities for tech.
With all these new opportunities, you mentioned earlier in your 4 of the 5 things that you remembered about image. What are the discussions within your focus group today about the image of Eureka?
Well, a lot of it has to do with beautification and cleanliness. So what we have prioritized is really spending quite a bit of money on hiring more facilities and maintenance folks to clean up litter and keep everything looking nice. We also have the marketing campaign from Eddie Alexander, which spends quite a bit trying to bring people to the area. But one of the things we really focused on when we asked for them to apply was creating a local image plan, so that, you know, the people in Eureka and our neighbors start to see what is beautiful and wonderful about it. So we have both that marketing element and the actual cleanliness element. And then simply just trying to talk about Eureka in a way that's positive and reminding people why we all want to live here.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I used to ask my civics classes when talking about Eureka, do you think it is a big little city or a little big city? What would you say it is?
I will tell you exactly what it is.
Wow.
It is a micropolitan.
That way. Say it again.
It's a micropolitan.
It's a micropolitan. I've never heard that word before.
It is a census-driven word, and I try to use it as much as possible because I do talk about Eureka is a small community with big city issues. And I think that term micropolitan really captures that. We have all of the things that a big city has to deal with, all of the social services, all of the infrastructure. You know, we're working on density because we've got a lot of people here. We're not a suburb by any means, and we're not rural. And I think when we think about Eureka, we have to remember we're not a suburb and we're not rural. We are the big city. We're the biggest city north of San Francisco on the coast, all the way up through Washington. So sometimes we have to act like that.
Well,
act like we're the big
that's something you can market around?
I don't know. But I do know. I was gonna say I'm gonna leave that to the marketers. I don't want to speak for them. But I do think that it's important when we talk about it, we remind people about that, because I think that we get caught up in this, we're a small town, so we shouldn't have to deal with X, Y, and Z. Traffic is one thing that I talk about a lot. We have this idea, and we love to go to see our friends in the big city and say, we don't have traffic where we live, but we do. We have traffic in Eureka, and we have high traffic times. And so if we would just allow ourselves to accept that, maybe we wouldn't get so frustrated when it takes us 15 minutes to get through town instead of 10.
So are some of the changes, say you were talking about the increase to the general fund and the need to change for infrastructure in case people come, is some of the changes that are going on to make it easier to get around? Is that part of the infrastructure plan?
There is a huge multimodal plan going on through Caltrans.
Stop again. Multimodal.
Multimodal is, it means that the highway is to be used by all modes of transportation. So there has been a project, and 101 is Caltrans, and so they're working collaboratively with us, but that is their baby, so that can become a source of conflict a little bit. I mean, I don't want to say we don't work well with them, but it definitely ties our hands in a lot of ways that is frustrating. But on this one project, we have been working very closely, and it is going to take a very long time, but they are starting on the south side of Eureka, doing some bike lanes and making that area just sort of a safer drive for everybody. In downtown, there's definitely more controversy about some of the options that they have, which include a few couplets, which would mean breaking out the highway so that it's just one way, and then another lane would go another direction so that it's less congested. But that's been pretty controversial, and so we anticipate, I hope it will happen, but it's going to take a long time because there will be a lot of debating while it happens.
Now, Eureka is the county seat of Humboldt County, so you have every aspect of government within the county here. is that a challenge, or is that an asset as far as when the city of Eureka is working with all these different government entities, even federal entities as well? How challenging is that at times?
Well, I don't know that being the county seat makes it more challenging than being anybody else. So I don't know that we have any additional challenges compared to like the city of Arcata, unless, so then it's just how do we work with the county, and primarily we do pretty well, and I think that those relationships are improving. Our new city manager has certainly been working hard, especially through some of the social service programming, which has been nice. Our police department's been working with their Department of Health and Human Services quite a bit. And maybe there is some geographic benefit to having them here. So I would say if there's anything, there's more of a geographic benefit than a hindrance.
Have you, now, you were not a person that had held elected office prior to becoming the mayor, right?
I had not.
Right. And so do you think you've brought in a new way, a fresh way of looking at government?
So I hadn't held office before, but I had served on the Economic Development Commission, and I've been working in economic development for 14 years or so. So I was pretty familiar with it. I don't know that I've brought in any groundbreaking ways to change how to work within the government. I've been spending a whole lot of my time just trying to figure out how to work within the government system. I know I did have an expectation that things would be harder on the inside. You know, it feels like once you get on the inside, everything will be easier, but it's not. It's actually harder because there's so many rules about what you can and can't do and who you can and can't talk to that you just don't have to worry about if you're, you know, on the outside looking in. However, one of the things that has been so fabulous about this position is if there's ever an issue I wanted to talk about, I can get people in a room in a heartbeat. It still surprises me when people are like, oh yeah, I'll come meet with you. I'm like, oh, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm so happy you'll talk to me about this.
There's no shortage of opinions, I bet.
No, I do not ever feel like I am lacking on people's opinions.
Now, has it been, I mean, just on a personal level, has it been harder than you thought it was going to be?
Well, you know, I did become mayor right before a pandemic.
Sure.
So when I was talking to somebody who's a regular, somebody who calls in and checks in regularly, has a lot of opinions, I said I was still trying to figure out what I could and couldn't tell him, because sometimes I'm like, did I talk about that in closed session, or what can I let him know? So I said, let me get back to you. And he said, oh yeah, this is your first rodeo, isn't it? I said, yeah, they put me on the biggest, meanest bull they had. Like, right. No sheeps. They were like, what's the worst case scenario? We'll change a city manager and we'll give her a pandemic. So,
right.
And part of that, I think, was really hard. I mean, really hard. There were many nights I would just sit in my bathtub and cry and go, how did I get into this? And then there are times when it feels really good. Like when you're in the middle of a pandemic, one of the things that I think people really need is to feel like they could do something. And I felt like I had a way to do something. So that I liked. Now that things are coming out of it, and we're getting back to normal, I think I just have some of the same sort of COVID fatigue tied in with this position that's really overpowering. I think people's emotions have been heightened over the past year. So maybe conversations that would have been a little bit more rational, a little less rational, because everybody's emotions are so intense. So it's been interesting.
So would you like to try it in a term that did not have a pandemic?
Well, you
Not
know,
making you commit. I'm just saying.
I, yeah, I mean, I think that I will continue to move forward, with what I'm doing. I don't know if you've ever belonged to boards. I'm sure you have. You have your first 2 years where you're just kind of trying to figure out how it works. And then your second term is when you're like, okay, now I've got this and I can make it work more smoothly. So I'm hoping that's what I experience, is that after this really hard term, I'm figuring out sort of the ins and outs of how to make things move forward quicker.
You said earlier in the interview that you ran because you had a vision. Now, obviously, having the pandemic, some of those parts of the vision had to be put on hold. Maybe that's a motivating factor, is to be able to come back out and to try to implement that original vision. Or maybe that vision has changed.
Well, actually, one of the things that I was really, I was part of my vision was really setting the tone and being able to create sort of this calm discussion about things. And during the pandemic, I think when people were really nervous, I gave my weekly addresses where I'd give people some information. And sometimes I would wonder if it was any good. But I would inevitably get phone calls every week from people who were like, I'm so glad you do that. I'm so grateful.
Yes.
And I felt like that was sort of, that tone setting was a big part of why I ran. And it sure did give me an opportunity to practice it.
Are you going to keep doing that, communicating?
I will. And we were talking about me doing them maybe quarterly. After 1 year of doing them, they get really hard to write every week.
Yes.
We decided to start highlighting some of our businesses and artists and employees and letting other people talk about what their experiences have been over the past year. And I think that was the right thing to do.
That's really cool, though. Come on. That's great.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Well, good. I hope you keep doing them. The fireside chat, so to speak, with Seaman. We're about out of time, but my goodness gracious, I have many more questions that maybe someday there can be part two. So I'd like to thank the mayor, Susan Seaman, for joining us, and thank the audience for joining us. I'm Paul Brasou, your host, and we'll see you next time on Community Voices. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
You too.
This has been Community Voices with your host, Paul Brasou. Thank you for joining us. If you represent a nonprofit organization and are interested in being a guest on Community Voices, send an email to info@accesshumboldt.net or call 476-1798. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.